Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to session 2 of the EdCollab gathering. We are talking about leadership today, talking about tackling leadership challenges and leading with joy. So we do hope that you will pop into our conversation through Twitter. We'd love to have you tweet your questions, your comments to us so that we can all be on the same page. Or at least answering your questions. So today I have some great presenters who will introduce themselves here in a moment, but those are all their Twitter handles if you want to take a peek at those. So we have people representing New Jersey, of course, shout out to New Jersey, as well as New York and Illinois, and in various levels of leadership. So I'm a supervisor myself, but we have associate principals, assistant principals, and principals. And Janice in particular has worked with literacy coaches as well, which is a very important role of leadership, so she can speak to that. And as you are tweeting today, if you could please use the hashtag the EdCollab Gathering, and then put a space, and then we are number 6, mighty number 6. So that is how you can keep in a conversation with us as well as with each other and those who are participating. So we're going to turn it over and ask everyone to introduce themselves. So Tony, we'll start with you. If you could tell us who you are and who was an educator that inspired you.
So hi, my name is Tony Sinanis, and I am a lead learner at Kaniag Elementary School, which is in Jericho, New York. It's a suburb of New York City, and I have been there for 7 years. And there are many people who inspire me, so to try to narrow it down to one is very challenging for me. But I could tell you that Jimmy Casas is someone who stands out as a model lead learner who inspires me to think about giving back, who inspires me to think about how to give voice to all members of the community and how to be a servant leader. So Jimmy Casas, if I had to pick one, that's who I'd go with.
We're forcing you today. But
I know.
There are many. And Ross.
Let me unmute. Hi, everybody. I'm Ross LeBrun. I'm a supervisor in the Orange Public Schools in Orange, New Jersey for language arts grades 9 through 12. And if I'm identifying, there's so many people in my PLN at this point, but before there was a PLN, there was just a professor named Jim Lerman at Kane University, and you can find him on Twitter at Jim Lerman. And he's the one who told me that in order to continue to improve and to inspire and to be a better educator, that connecting through some level of social media was a must. So I always give big props to Jim. He was a major motivator and inspirer to me.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome. And John, go ahead and introduce yourself. And mute your microphone. All right, we'll move to Janice. John might be frozen.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Janice Schwarze, and I am an associate principal for curriculum and instruction in Downers Grove, Illinois. My 2nd year in that position. And Heather's not going to like what I have to say, but the person who inspires me as a leader right now is Heather Rocco. She got me into tweeting. She's the first person to get me on and got me into PLNs and Google Hangouts and inspired me to become a convention program chair for CEL. And so she pushes me all the time, and yet she manages to do her day job very well, and that's what I strive to do, is kind of stay out there active, learning and doing these things, and still doing the job that counts at home as well.
You're very sweet. You inspire me too. So
thanks.
And I think John's back. Hi, John.
Hey, I got booted out, but I'm back.
Okay, great. So if you just introduce yourself to our group here.
My name is John Fritzky, and I'm an assistant principal at the Byram Intermediate School in North Jersey. And this is my 2nd year as an assistant principal. And I love working with middle school kids. It's great. It's a really fun age to work with students. And if I had to pick one person, one educator who inspires me, it's tough to narrow it down to just one. But Brad Gustafson in Minnesota is tremendous. If you have a chance to follow him and you're not, I highly recommend it. He's somebody who cares about the whole child, not just one particular subject.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Welcome. We have a few conversations that we're going to take on today. One is tackling leadership challenges, but then we're keeping a joyful mindset. So we're going to start off with some questions that we're going to show up on the screen here. So let me just take a moment. And we'll move forward for question number 1, hopefully, maybe in a second. There we go. So what has been your biggest challenge as an education leader, and how did you overcome it? And I think Tony's going to tackle this one first for us.
So let me just put it out there that I have not overcome it yet, but my biggest challenge is finding balance, and balance across so many areas. You know, balance between being an administrator and being a lead learner, balance between being a lead learner and being an instructional leader, balance between being the organizational sort of overseer and the transformational leader that everyone hopes to see, but more importantly, balance between being an educator and being a dad, and you know, in life. And so those are such hard things to balance for anyone, or at least for me. So I keep telling myself it's just anyone, not just me, to give yourself to all those things, right? Because we're so emotionally invested in what we do. We're so emotionally invested in kids and in their well-being, and so that takes a lot of heart and soul. It's not just thought processes. It's not just crossing T's and dotting I's. And so when you want to give so much of yourself to so many different people, finding balance can be quite a challenge. But I think overcoming it is about compartmentalizing. And when you're in a space, be 100% in that space. So if you're in a classroom, be in that classroom 100%. When you're in your office checking email, as not fun as that is, be there 100%. And when you're with your family or your loved ones, put your phone down, or, you know, don't check your email. Be there 100%. And that's hard to do, but that's a way, I think, to potentially overcome it.
Great. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to jump in on that question? What is a challenge that you have faced, and how are you in the process of overcoming it?
I think speaking to Tony's point about balance, I actually saw Tony in a pizzeria, actually at a tavern near where I live, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's Tony right there. I see him all the time. He's in my PLN, but he was having dinner, and he was, you know, with friends, and it was kind of that situation where I was with my family, and I've connected with Tony before. I met him at Ed Camp, New Jersey last year, and it just wasn't the time for us to go out and have a conversation, because our talk would not have been like family's dinner time. It would have been like business time, you know. So I reached out to him on Twitter later, and we, joked about the fact, you should say hi, whatever. But it's a matter of being, as Tony said, being 100% into what it is you're doing at that time. So I think it's really sage advice, and also it's hard to live it. So.
Yeah. Well, stepping away from email, I know, is a challenge for me. I just find myself I just want to stay on top of it, because it can become so overwhelming if you let it go for even a few hours. Yeah, that's a big thing. I know for myself, one of the things that has been a challenge, but a wonderful challenge, has been getting teachers on board with an idea that you have, or that you've heard about, or just a best practice that you'd really like to see happening in classrooms, and working with those who perhaps are a little bit more resistant, and finding ways to get them as excited about the work that you'd love to see happen in the classroom as you are. So kind of that slow process. I know that we're often excited and we get excited about something, but I've learned that really it's the gentle nudges that move people along more quickly, or perhaps more productively, and letting people have that time that they need to grow and move forward with their own learning and their learning process. So that's, I know, something I've learned. And I learned that from Todd Whitaker's book. If you haven't read Motivating Teachers, I'm not getting the title right, I know, but that's one of my favorite go-to texts that I read many years ago when I was first in a leadership program in school. So I definitely recommend that one. So great. All right. We're going to move on, I think, to question number 2. So, sorry. How do you remain joyful then in your work, even through those difficult times? What are some of the things that when we confront frustrations, we're only human, of course, but we have to maintain and be that positive role model for our staff, for our students, for our parents, and our community. So how do you go about doing that? And Janice, if you'd like to start us off.
You know, I thought about that a lot, and I think what I tend to do the most is I leave my office, I get out into the school, and I start watching the great things that are happening. I start talking to kids. I start talking to teachers. It reminds me of why I'm in this business. It reminds me that what I'm doing, I hope, is making a difference, because sometimes when you're sitting in that office, you're like, okay, is this really making a difference? And so just getting out there, walking the building, talking to the teachers, finding out what they're doing, asking kids in the hallway what activities they're in, what, books they're reading. I popped in on book club one day after school in the library. They were just meeting, and I said, hey, do you guys mind if I join? And I was just there for like a month, so they didn't even know me. And they're like, sure. I said, do you even know who I am? They said, no. I said, so you just let strange people just join your book club? I'm like, well, you're wearing a staff ID, so I think it's probably okay. So I introduced myself, and I sat down with them and just had a great discussion about the book because I had read it. And I think, that for me is something that I can do very quickly. Takes 15 minutes out of my day, and I feel so much better. But then also I would say this kind of thing, filling my bucket with PD, whether it's through a Google Hangout or going to a conference or reading a book. I need that. I'm a learner too, and so I feel like finding the time to do that, those are the ways that I remain joyful. Which, going back to Tony's point, sometimes that's hard for me because I think I got to get to those emails, I got to do this. But I have learned that if I don't do these things that make me happy, then I'm not going to be happy, and my school's not going to be happy. There's a saying that if mom's not happy, the kids aren't happy. I think it applies to school and leadership as well.
Absolutely. Tony, what are some of your thoughts about staying positive and joyful?
I think Janice hit it on the head there. Todd Whitaker says when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold, right? So when the principal's cranky or grumpy, I kind of think the whole school becomes cranky and grumpy. So I try to avoid that. And for me, again, exactly what Janice said, I will go down to a kindergarten classroom. I will sit in a second grade classroom. I'll go have lunch with a bunch of kids. Generally, it's my kids that will kind of help me refocus and kind of put me back in that space that reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It is for kids. It's for the best interest of kids, even when it's not easy, even when it's frustrating and challenging, even when you're dealing with mandates and policies that seem to have nothing to do with kids. You go back and you talk to a kid, and they remind you about why you're there. I was having the most stressful morning because we had state testing this week in New York State, and I don't think I'm allowed to publicly comment on it. But let's just say it wasn't like wasn't the best 3 days of our year so far. But it was a stressful morning because we had to unpack tests and we couldn't find something. Whatever. Anyway, I walked into a kindergarten classroom, and this little boy was like, "So next Friday you graduate college?" And I was like, no, next Friday I defend my dissertation. He's like, I'm going to call you Dr. Mustache from now on. I was like, that's awesome, I walked away and I was smiling. And so for me, it's often just that, but also connecting with other educators who inspire me. I talk to John on a regular basis. We use Voxer to connect, right? Or to Brad, or to Eric Scheninger, or to Joe Maz. The list goes on and on. Amber Team and Joe Sanfilippo is like my brother. When I need a boost or when I need a refocus or a reframing of a problem, I just reach out, and that's another way to kind of get around it, because as educational leaders, it's a very isolating kind of experience. Even when you work with the best staff and the best community and the most adorable kids, it's you often. So being able to reach out to people who get it, who can give you that fuel, that energy, that perspective, is a really important and powerful piece. So we as educational leaders need to continue learning through those connections, and those connections often keep us centered in joy, I think, at least for me.
That's great. Anybody else want to weigh in before we move on here? John or Ross?
I think for me, it comes down to trying to reduce the stress for teachers whenever possible. So when we have things like mandated state testing, trying to do those trainings in a way that makes it fun and exciting for the teachers. I could stand up in front of the teachers and give them all the rules and regulations and scare them all, and then everybody leaves in a panic, and that trickles down to students as well. So when we do things like that, we try to make it into a game. I don't know if anybody here's ever used Kahoot, but it's a big thing in my school where the kids are all using Kahoot and they love it. So we did that for the teachers, where they had to try to get the highest score possible to see who knew how to do the park testing procedures the best. And that was a lot of fun for us, instead of having just a regular kind of PowerPoint instruction.
That's great. Teachers yet. That's a great idea. Great. Alrighty. We're going to move on to question number 3. Give me 1 minute. So we have, of course, many literacy educators participating today, and that can be a challenge for some people to see themselves as literacy educators if they're not perhaps in a K-5 experience, where they are in perhaps a high school, where they just see themselves as the science educator or the social studies educator. So if we would take a little time to discuss, how have you led teachers in all subject areas to see themselves as literacy educators? And John, why don't you start us off there with that response?
Sure. This was a big goal of ours at a middle school level for both the principal and myself. And what we did was, last year we started to have our teachers meet together as teams by grade level. So the math, social studies, science, language arts teacher would all meet together. And we would have each subject be responsible for a month. So let's say, for example, the month of January, the science teacher would be responsible for developing a reading passage and questions for the students to answer that would require them to write. Then they get together as a team and score them holistically. So now all of a sudden the science teacher realizes what the valuable skills are that the language arts teacher is trying to get across. And the social studies teacher realizes that as well. The only modification we had to make was for the math, because they had problem solving and then they had a right to explain. So that was the modification we made there. And that led us to this year, where we introduced a new class called an interdisciplinary class. And so every day for an hour, the kids have a class that's planned by the science, social studies, language arts, and math teacher. And they plan a unit that will take about a month or 2 for the kids to get through, but it requires them to have skills in all discipline areas, so that when the students produce something, they're producing something out of all of that. Because we really believe that we're not teaching just math or just language arts or just science, we're teaching kids. And even though we're at a middle school level, we need to reach kids and have them solve real problems. And literacy impacts all of that. That no matter what subject you're in, you're going to have to read, you're going to have to write, you're going to have to respond to those things. So that was kind of our 2-year process to get there. And we're really proud of what the kids are doing. They're doing their own TED Talks. They're doing like a Shark Tank kind of presentation thing. So it's a lot of real fun activities for the kids, and they don't realize all the literacy skills that they're using while they're engaged in these kind of activities.
Oh, that's amazing. Janice, I know that you've done quite a bit with cross-discipline literacy.
Yes, that's my area of passion, for sure.
Could you talk to that?
Sure. I'll start maybe with kind of piggybacking off of what John was talking about. We attack the Common Core standards as a school rather than just having the English teachers unpack them. So originally started out with the social studies chair and then the science chair, and then we ended up bringing in everybody across the school. So we started with speaking and listening. We had every department in the district represented, and we unpacked standards. We created rubrics, and then we created professional development sessions where we taught teachers how to structure a discussion, how to help kids do a great presentation, how to help them analyze the speaker so that they can detect bias and analyze their use of evidence so they're not just swayed by emotion. And so it was a 2-year process just on speaking and listening. It was fantastic. It was one of the highlights of my career. Actually, the NCTE Council Chronicle just highlighted our science and social studies department chairs, who were 2 of the major facilitators of our efforts. So if you can check out that article, it's awesome. So, and we're working on writing right now. So trying to empower all of our teachers to see that this is important in all of our classes. And like John said, we're not teaching kids, we are teaching kids. We're not just teaching English or social studies or science, but we're teaching them to be ready to go out and be successful in the workplace, in college, whatever, and to appreciate life. And some of these things can come through the standards, believe it or not, I think, if you approach them correctly. But my other, I think, big comment would be with our literacy coaching. We have in our district a very strong literacy coaching program, and I was fortunate enough to start the program over at South High School, and we were able to get really many of our subject area teachers to volunteer to be coached. And I think the value of that was that they saw it was one-to-one, they focused on their needs, and they saw that if they could teach their students to be better readers in their classroom, they were going to understand the content better. And what was great was it started out with one or two really high-powered teachers who were agreeing to be coached and then showing the success in their classes, and then other teachers started saying, hey, I want some of that. What's going on? Why are your kids doing so well? And so we have science, social studies, CTE. Our PE teachers actually asked our reading coaches to come in and do lessons for the classes, teach them how to do reading, read these articles, how do you pick out main ideas and things like that. Our PE teachers were the ones that asked us to start that. So I feel that the coaching is a great way in because it's one-to-one and it can help everybody.
That's wonderful. Does anybody else have literacy coaches that you work with in your district that you'd like to talk about there?
I can jump in and tell you that we had a literacy coach, but budget cuts have unfortunately compromised our ability to maintain that position at this point. But fortunately, she was there for 4 years, and she made such inroads with our teachers, and mainly to get buy-in, right, and to understand that at the core, every school is a literacy school. Like, we're teaching kids how to think. Reading is thinking, writing is thinking, math is thinking. So ultimately, they all come back to that idea of thinking, and at the core of it is literacy. And for us, it was about embracing the workshop model, both readers and writers workshop, and getting kids to lead conferences, to publish work, to establish goals for themselves as readers. So not only empower teachers with new PD, but to also empower students. And we were really lucky to also this year have Joellen McCarthy come in. I think she's participating somewhere in the Ed Collab gathering today. PD Love, hashtag PD Love. You got to look up that hashtag. But she is awesome, and she has helped continue our quest to get better as literacy instructors, learners, teachers, all that.
Joellen's awesome. I just love her work. She's fantastic. So, and she's presenting during the last block of sessions, I think, at 2 o'clock. So definitely check her out. She's in conference with an author, which will be great. Okay, let's keep going forward. Kind of with that idea in mind, sometimes then if people are uncomfortable as literacy educators, we have certain materials in their classrooms. So Ross, I think you're going to start us off with that question number 4.
With question, I think I was not hearing.
I'm sorry.
No,
so
that's okay.
Yeah. So how do you encourage teachers to take risk and try new instructional strategies or materials in their classroom? And I have to move the slide forward. Sorry.
No, that's okay. We have a mantra in my department, and our mantra is that you cannot be engaging until you're engaged. So, in a lot of the materials that our ELA staff uses, they themselves bring to the table. We start them kind of on a thematic piece, and they come to the table during common planning time with, I want to attach this article from the New York Times to the study of, let's say, the Crucible. So we look at the Crucible as a study of hysteria, and how can we best kind of teach our students what hysteria is through a number of different texts, and it all depends on the teacher and the class, where the students are and how they're going to be able to to kind of reach levels of understanding. So within that, the teachers have to be willing to fail, willing to look at a brand new piece of material that comes out and say, and in front of their students, be able to unpack it with them and say, what are we taking from this? How are we making these connections? And it's not blind. They certainly plan as they go through it, but it keeps our curriculum very much a live document that is always able to be grown and changed just as our students are. So as the students then take more responsibility through the course of the units of study, they're able to, and not the Lucy Calkins units of studies, but looking at what their themes are, they're actually in their research able to show growth as learners by pulling in more materials. And the teachers have moments where they come back and they report out and they say, you know what, that really kind of fell flat. There was less interest than I thought. There were it didn't have the connections that I saw happening, but it did send us in a different direction. And I'm open enough as a leader to be able to say, okay, what are we going to do in the future that will be, I don't know, either more engaging or more instructional. So that's how we approach it.
That's great. And Tony has to leave us a little early, so this will be Tony's last question, I think. But how do you encourage teachers to take risks and try new things?
Just so everyone knows, Tony's trying to maintain balance and get his son to a birthday party on time. That's why he has to leave early. I'm going to be 100% in that car getting to the birthday party. But in terms of having teachers take risks, I think it starts with modeling. And I know for me as an educational leader, I try to model as much as possible that risk-taking is the norm, should be the norm, because risk-taking in my mind is equivalent to learning, right? I recently completed my dissertation research study, well, the whole thing is done, and we looked at how principals were using Twitter for professional development, and the one thing that resonated the most was this idea that if we want people to learn and to value learning, it has to resonate on a personal level. And so when we want teachers to take risks, and we want teachers to try things, it has to resonate on a personal level. They have to see the value in it. They have to see it as something that's going to be better for their kids. They have to see it as something that's going to be better for themselves. And the best way I have seen that happen is by modeling it. So I put myself out there every single day. And I call myself a lead learner, not the lead learner, because I try to model in that way. I'm always trying something new. I'm always willing to take a risk. And it has failed miserably many a times and in front of people generally, which is great, and because I don't take myself too seriously, I can kind of get past it. I take my work seriously but not myself, and that's another key I think to joy. Take your work seriously but not yourself. I've been able to model for them, go out there and do it, and I don't care what APPR requirements we have to fill. I don't care if 40% of their evaluation is going to be connected to a student test score, because that's not what's going to show us their growth and their evolution as individuals, as leaders, as thinkers, as teachers, and that's how I try to inspire them to take risks. Even though it's not easy, I think it's important.
It's great, and I think modeling it is just the key to it. I found in myself, like going in and demoing a lesson or a new strategy myself and getting feedback from teachers as I do it and what did work and didn't work. It's a really powerful
and it's powerful for kids to see us doing, for the kids to see us putting ourselves out there as modelers and engagers and risk takers together and having those conversations in front of the kids. So what did you think about that? How did that go? What could we do better? I think that's really important. The whole community needs to be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I know, Tony, you're going to sign off here in a couple moments, but thank you for joining us. Congratulations on your dissertation work.
Thank you.
Being at the end of that journey, and for contributing today. We really appreciate it. So
thank you for having me, Heather. You're amazing. And the rest of you, thank you so much. Have a great Saturday, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. All right. So we are going to continue talking about leadership here. And we've been talking, well, of course, you're part of the Ed Collab gathering today. So collaboration is a really important part of our work, as well as growth. So as a leader in your own leadership role, if you could share a little bit about what has been your most effective collaborative experience in that role, and describe some of the specifics of it in terms of how it came to be and what came out of it and how perhaps you grew in your own leadership position because of it. So I think, John, you can start us off there.
different ed camps. And for those of you who have ever been to an ed camp, you know that it is a wonderful experience where people go and share their absolute best practices. And from that experience, I've often come back and worked on projects with people collaboratively together. So, for example, Tony, who just left us, and Brad Gustafson from Minnesota, the three of us have been working on projects over the last year and a half that connect our schools. So it'll be an example of students sharing books, and they give their opinions and feedbacks of books, and we do it over video, and then we combine those together, and now all of a sudden we have a piece of work that connects schools across the country. And it's a really powerful experience for not only us as leaders, but as for the teachers as well, to see that they can break down the walls of their school and they can connect to other places that they never imagined, and for the students to get real value from their work, that they realize that the work that they do is not just for the teacher in front of them, that it's for, you know, the whole country or for other students in other grades and other schools as well. So I think an EdCamp model has kind of allowed those opportunities for us as leaders to connect with other leaders, because oftentimes we feel isolated, especially in our own district, where we're seen as the expert or the leader or the problem solver on certain things. And to be able to have other ideas is really a great attribute to have.
That's great. I know you and I met because we got tossed together at not an ed camp, but at a conference, and we just decided, yeah, sure, okay, we'll present together. We've seen one another probably on Twitter, even though we're in the same state, and that was a really fantastic experience for me. It was so great to work with you. So sometimes it happens, collaborative experiences happen kind of serendipitously too. So and then it establishes ongoing colleagues and collegial opportunities. So it's great.
Absolutely, and I love the EdCamp model because no one person is the expert. Like when you and I worked together, it was great because I learned more from you than I'm sure you learned from me. And even some people who were there in the audience were able to teach me things that I didn't know. I know that I always walk away with at least one new tip, even if I'm presenting, from people in the audience who share things. And I think that that's so valuable to have not just one person be seen as the expert or the leader on something.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, Ross, thank you. I'm going to jump in on that. So what's been one of your most powerful collaborative experiences as a leader?
I want to talk about the EdCamp experience because that's been completely amazing. It's really changed the way I look at my own PD and the way I encourage my teachers. But the one experience that I've really I took from the job, the role that I'm in now, was we as a team created new classes that would count for juniors and seniors towards their graduation requirements to increase the idea of student-centered learning. So we put together literature courses like Lit and Film, Gothic literature, mythology, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive from the students because now they're choosing their where their path is going to take them once they get past the English 1, English 2 experience. They're able to kind of look at being a junior and senior and saying, okay, as a junior I want to take, let's say, literature and film, and then as a senior I might look at that mythology class, or I might like the English 4 traditional classic British lit route. So that has been really positive. One of the areas, if we go back to that failure question, or willingness to take risk, when I wrote the course description for our outdoor adventure lit class, which includes texts like The Hunger Games, we go back to Lord of the Flies, there are a couple other pieces. I wrote them for adults to approve, and I didn't think to go back and rewrite them for the course catalog. So in our first year, students saw what came across as not so much of an exciting course as like a description of existential theory, and like we're going to talk about Thoreau, and they're like, that doesn't sound fun. And I had to actually go back for the second year and rewrite them so they had a bit more of the draw for our learners. So that's been a really, really positive experience, and I'm excited.
Great. And Janice, I'm going to ask you to jump in too. Janice was the program chair for CEL in DC, and her theme was leading in a collaborative world. So Janice, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question too.
Sure. I picked that theme because I've always been a collaborator, and I've always said it doesn't matter what job I've been in, that this job is too hard to do alone. Whether I was a teacher, department chair, assistant principal, doesn't matter. I've needed to collaborate with others. And as a teacher, I taught an interdisciplinary group where I worked with an English teacher. Well, I was the English teacher. There was a science teacher, a social studies teacher. We tried math for a year. That was a little harder to make authentic connections. That was fabulous. The work that I talked about earlier with the Common Core was probably the most exciting work that I've done in a collaborative way, because it was so large, yet it was so focused, and that's kind of hard to do sometimes. But oh my gosh, like you and John were talking about learning from each other, what I learn from my colleagues every day, it's just amazing. And in this new job, my counterpart at the other school, she was new to the associate principal position too. And honestly, if we didn't collaborate on a daily basis, neither one of us would have been effective. And so just being able to pick up the phone and say, I have no idea what I'm doing, can you help me? And each bring different strengths to the table has been huge. So I feel very blessed to have worked with a lot of people in my life, and I hope that continues, because I really believe that that's the key to success.
That's great. In collaboration, we also are our own collaborative experiences. Of course, we want to model that for teachers and encourage teachers to collaborate with one another, which I think helps to build a positive climate and culture in your school, because they see one another as resources. So if we could tackle one of our final questions for today, which is, how do you nurture and maintain a positive culture and climate in your school, and what are some of the strategies that you have utilized when perhaps things aren't quite going so well, and you need to change the tide of what could fall into negativity? So I think, Janice, you can start us off there.
I'm going to go back to what Tony said in an earlier question. You got to model it. I think you have to be real. Show your passion, your enthusiasm for things. Let people know what your strengths are, but let them see your vulnerabilities as well. Take those risks, and when people see that, they know that they're not expected to be perfect either, whether it's the students or the teachers or both. And I just feel like you can be more positive then, because I think teachers just naturally have this feeling that they have to save the world, and they're responsible for so many things, and the community holds them responsible for so many things. And if we don't get out there and show them that you can take risks and you can fail, but you can still make progress, I think it can get negative really quickly. And so I think that they need to know that you're just a real person just like them. And honestly, they just want to know that they've been heard. Listening is one of the most important skills as a leader. And I'll tell you, that was a challenge for me at the beginning, because I'm a problem solver. I've got that middle child syndrome where I try to solve everyone's problems. And I had to sit down and say, you know what, they don't want me to solve the problem, they just want me to listen. And I think that really helps to build a positive culture as well. That'd be my short answer.
Great. And John, give us your thoughts about building a positive culture.
I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is allow teachers more time to work together, because at the end of the day, I think every teacher wants to do great things. They don't want to do just good things, they want to be great. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to arrange our faculty meetings to have just particular subject areas or grade levels meet at a time. So for example, our faculty meetings are on Mondays. And so Monday will be language arts, Tuesday will be science, the next one will be social studies, so that they'll still have the same number of faculty meetings, but they get to kind of pour over all the different struggles that they have in a particular subject area. And I think that hearing from one another, both the successes and, as Janice spoke about, sometimes just a vent about a topic that you're having difficulty with, and you need somebody who teaches what you teach to hear it. Because if I come up with a problem or a way to solve it, or I sympathize, it's not really the same as a teacher who lives it every day. So we're trying to provide our teachers with those opportunities for next year. And I also work with a really great principal who will call people out sometimes for spreading that negativity. I work in a really great school with really great teachers, but every once in a while somebody will, just get a little bit too negative. And I know Amber Tiemann says that what we allow, we promote. And sometimes we just need to have a conversation with teachers that, when you did this, it really did kind of hurt the culture of the school, or other people, it could really bring them down when you do this. And it's just a simple conversation. It's nothing, you're not yelling at anybody, but sometimes we just need to point those things out for teachers because they don't always realize it. So I think those are the two things that we're working on right now.
It's great. Wonderful. We're heading toward the end here. We have a few minutes left. To conclude today, I would like for us to share what is the best piece of leadership advice that you've ever received, and you can share, who said it to you, but what is the kind of mantra or your motto or what you go back to time and again to keep you inspired and to make you an effective leader? Oh, so Ross, why don't you start us off? No pressure.
Okay, the best piece of leadership advice, I think, probably came from my teacher roommate, who I married 9 years ago, who told me, don't ever forget where you came from. And, we always, when I was in the classroom, I always had the conversations with people who are like, when's the last time they were in the classroom? They have no idea what we're dealing with. And I've really tried to maintain the understanding that, Tony mentioned it before, he is a lead learner in his building. And the idea that while I am on paper, I have a title, my real job is to be a teacher of teachers, and I try to treat them as students to really differentiate the ways that I instruct them, but also to understand the things that they're going through. So understand that they're dealing with pressures that are coming from on high, that they have timelines, that they have real students in their classes who are dealing with real things, and it's not always as simple as it's another junior who's got to make sure that they pass their exams or the things that are given to them, but they're real people who have real needs, and trying to remember that, and trying to always remember that the teachers who I work with are real people who have real issues, and just try to really empathize with that. That's the best advice I've ever received, and try to take forward.
Great. Thank you. Janice, what's some of the best leadership advice that you've received?
First, I guess I would just say that I totally agree with everything that Ross said. That's so important. So I think the best advice I received was don't try to do everything. Don't try to solve all the problems. And focus on a few things and do it well for your own sanity, for your teacher's sanity, for the students. That's sometimes a challenge, because you look at your day and you think you want us to do this, and you want to try that, and you want to try that. And when I do hangouts like this, or I go to conferences, I think I want to try that because I like to learn new ideas and put them into practice. But trying to focus on a few things and do them well has been great leadership advice that I continue to try to remind myself to follow.
Great. Thank you. And John, some of the best leadership advice you've received?
In education, sometimes we're missing courageous conversations, like those conversations that are a little bit difficult to start, or you feel a little bit uncomfortable addressing, but that it needs to be talked about and it needs to be addressed. And I think that tackling those conversations as soon as possible has been some of the best advice that I've been given, because the times where I haven't tackled those conversations in the beginning has led to bigger problems down the line. So trust your gut, and when you have that kind of feeling, to have a really courageous conversation with those people, I think sooner than later is some of the best advice that I've received.
That is so important. I like how you framed it too, a courageous conversation. Sometimes we call them difficult conversations, and language matters to me. I like that word choice much, much better, because it really does matter. Well, we are wrapping up. Thank you so very much to Ross and John and Janice and Tony for joining the conversation today. I've got to go through and read some of the tweets that I haven't been able to keep up with, but we've had lots of good conversation going on here and then behind the scenes as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. Please please follow along for the rest of the day. We have session 3 starting at 1 o'clock with 3 sessions that are offered there. And we thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone. We have a great session 3 coming up, and here are some of the sessions going on.